Well, guess what? The World Wildlife Federation has a report on planet-based diets as well. I suspect the terminology evolved with Rockstrom, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to be just very brief. The report is relatively long. What are planet-based diets? I didn't know anything about this because it sounds like a fancy term. Everybody knows plant-based diets. Obviously, you want to reduce emissions from food systems, and I have lots of podcasts on that from let's say based on the Project Drawdown. I have a full course on Project Drawdown, and I also have a full course on bending the curve. Bending the curve here basically means reducing the emissions. We are increasing and increasing and increasing the emissions. They have to peak and start coming down. So planet-based diets are win-win consumption patterns that are high on human health benefits and low on environmental impacts. They comprise healthy and sustainable ingredients produced within planetary boundaries and adaptable to local contexts. These diets encourage overconsumption. These diets discourage overconsumption of any food to the extent that overconsumption negatively impacts biodiversity, the environment, and human health. In particular, a large body of evidence has shown that reducing overconsumption of animal source foods by increasing the relative consumption of plant-based foods confers both environmental and health benefits, which is what the win-win is. The details of the report actually go into projecting the food diet patterns. So they categorize diet patterns and map them onto planetary boundaries, which is what this is. So let's just read key points and then another slide on the 5 strategic actions. Shifting diets can unlock a multitude of environmental and health benefits, including combating the climate and biodiversity crises, relieving water stress and eutrophication of lakes and oceans, and saving lives. But these impacts play out differently in countries around the world and must be assessed separately for each country. That's good. Dietary shifts toward more planet-friendly diets is a powerful lever that achieves more ambitions. These are. Let me read it again. Dietary shifts toward more planet-friendly diets is a powerful lever for achieving more ambitious nationally determined contributions, a more holistic post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and a renewed commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. All nice. I'm hungry, it's lunchtime actually. Nationally, dietary guidelines are important tools for changing diets and act as a bridge between global dietary recommendations and local context and relevance. Current NDGs, National Dietary Guidelines, however, are not ambitious enough to achieve global goals and commitments and should therefore be reviewed and updated to ensure they are in line with global health and environmental targets. 5 strategic actions needed to be achieved to bend the curve on food system that currently exploits nature on that restores nature to one that restores nature. So bending the curve, I mentioned the pollution curve or greenhouse gas emissions curve, but actually here it is the food production curve, or this curve that we will look at in a minute. Okay, I spoke too soon, which I do too often. Okay, full range of did I skip something? Yeah, a little bit more. Okay, 5 strategic actions need to be achieved to bend the curve on a food system that currently exploits nature to one that restores nature. These actions are reversing biodiversity loss, living within the global carbon budget for food, feeding humanity on existing cropland, achieving negative emissions, and improving water and fertilizer use. So things like global carbon budget, they are not very robust concepts, especially if you say for food we have such a carbon budget. Typically you hear that we have only so much carbon budget left because we need to stay within 2 degrees C warming, and we have only 10 years left to save ourselves. These are all kind of nonsensical statements, so you have to be careful about carbon budget for food and so on. but being careful about improving water and fertilizer use is always good. A full range of policy levers need to be implemented to leverage dietary changes as a tool for achieving the 5 strategic actions outlined in this report. Countries must commit to closing the evidence gaps that remain regarding specific implications of dietary shifts at the national level and which actions are most effective for their context. So prioritizing those is very critical. Just to close out, 5 strategic actions then. 5 strategic actions which can be strongly influenced by dietary changes need to be achieved to bend the curve on the negative impacts of the food system shown here, moving from one which exploits the planet to one that restores it for nature and people. These are reversing biodiversity loss, living within global carbon budget for food. What does this mean? Reduce total greenhouse gas emissions from food reduction to at most 5 gigaton CO2 equivalent, the maximum allowable total carbon emissions or carbon budget from producing our food. You have to go and see Rockström's paper to see where these numbers come from, but I can pretty much assure you that this is made up with a lot of assumptions, and I don't think we are in a position to make such a division between, once you start with the idea that we want to limit global warming to 2 degrees C or 1.5 degrees C, then you say the global warming is linearly proportional to cumulative carbon from the Industrial Revolution. So how many more tons can you add before you hit 2 degrees C? And you call that the remaining carbon budget. And that's already tricky because where the carbon will come from, which industry, which sector, and so on are tricky. And then to say food sector is emitting 25%, so we'll take 5 gigaton CO2 equivalent to be the remaining food carbon budget is anyway, I'm skeptical about it, let's say. But CO2 equivalent is of course where you are converting non-CO2 gases into CO2 in terms of global warming potential, considering their impact on global warming. Okay. Thirdly, feeding humanity on existing cropland. So you cannot create new croplands because it comes at a cost of some environmental degradation or deforestation. Achieving negative emissions. This is another pipe dream in some ways because we don't have the technologies. Move agriculture from a carbon source to a carbon sink, including by freeing up existing agricultural lands that can be reforested or restored, and rapidly implementing food production practices that increase carbon storage on existing cropland. Good ideas, of course. Optimizing crop yields. Use all agricultural lands to their maximum potential, including optimizing crop yields through better food production practices that more efficiently use water and fertilizers, preserve ecosystem functions, and contribute to resilient landscapes. There is warming, there are precipitation pattern changes, duration, intensity, frequency, and so on. So you have to do all these as climate change keeps going and as we haven't bent the curve on emissions yet. So remember that. Figure 1 here, national level successes on 5 strategic actions is needed to bend the curve on the negative impacts of the food system, moving from one that exploits the planet to one that restores it for nature and people. We read it as many times as possible. The relative position of the lines does not reflect the magnitude of the potential impact of each action, but instead that all 3 actions are important. So you are here on the restoring end of our activity and exploiting end. So we have been here and we want, if we continue status quo, then we'll continue to exploit the nature and the planet. But if we shift diets, move to diets and food loss and waste being reduced as well, diets, food loss, waste, and production, then we can begin to bend this curve of exploiting the planet in an unsustainable way. So nature restoration will depend on a combination of dietary shifts, reduction in food loss and waste, and adoption of nature positive production practices. Nature positive is where you're restoring nature more than you're exploiting it, as we said. Dietary shifts are potentially the quickest action to achieve and can help facilitate other two actions like food loss and waste reduction and production, which is restorative, let's say. Okay, so I'll leave it here. It's longer than I expected, but that's life. But at least we got to a new topic in this context of solving the great food puzzle. Okay, let's leave it here and take this as one package on food systems. We have other packages before that we looked at from the emissions perspective and so on. Either way, see you in the next topic.